I'll get started then, just for some housekeeping. My name is Megan. So I am assistant manager at Business West, and today I'll be talking about digital ATA Carnets, in collaboration with Live here. And I'm also joined by my colleague Fiona, who will be helping in the background, looking over the chat and Q&A whilst I'm talking. So how many people have we got now? 20 people. So I think I'll get started as the last few start to arrive. So just for anyone who's joined in the last couple of minutes, the meeting is being recorded, so please do feel free to switch off your camera if you'd like to. We will be sharing the recording at the end for those who wish to have access, as well as a slide deck if need be. So I think we are ready to get going with 3 minutes in now. So yeah, I'll start if that's all right. Okay, so thank you for joining me today on this webinar. As I have said, so I'm assistant manager here at Business West, also known as Bristol Chamber of Commerce. So we are a team of international trade experts and we issue ATA carnets on a regular basis. So I have been here with Business West for just over 2.5 years now, handling a multitude of export documentation such as certificates of origin, etc., including that of the ATA Carnet, for which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with as musicians and touring experts. So yes, welcome again to the webinar. We'll be discussing the digitalization of the ATA Carnet. So the bulk of this presentation will last about 40 to 45 minutes. Any specific questions related to you or your business, feel free to reach out to me via email after the webinar. I'll provide my email address. More than happy to discuss digital carnets on a case-by-case basis. But this webinar is intended to give you an overview of the project, where we stand and what is to come with the digitalization of ATA carnets. So yeah, the last 10-15 minutes we'll do some questions. Feel free to use the chat or Q&A function and we'll address those at the end, as it's quite likely the answer to some of your questions might be answered during the webinar. So without further ado, let's just go into some agenda. So I'll aim to inform you today of the changes which are coming to the ATA Carnet scheme and guide you through making the change work for you and your business. So I'll begin by explaining what is an ATA Carnet, just in case there are any of you on the call today who aren't already familiar. And we'll go through how they are used in practice, just to set some context for the Digital Carnet project. We'll run through the timeline for the project's introduction. I'll explain the objectives, and we'll follow this with a demo of the eATA Carnet app, which will be the location for the digital carnets. I'll then outline some important changes and processes, so please do stick around to hear these, as they will no doubt affect some of your usual habits when it comes to ATA carnets. I'll invite you to take part in the trials excuse me, of digital carnets, and at the end we'll run through some FAQs. So just for some background here, we at Business West have been at the forefront of the Digital Carnet project, working closely with UK Natico, who are the UK's governing body for all ATA carnets in the UK. Most of the digital carnet developments are at the discretion of UK Natico and the global network of stakeholders in the project, who are still working hard to liaise with HMRC, foreign customs authorities, border force staff, overseas NGOs all over the world to try and bring digital carnets successfully into fruition. However, many of the discussions are still to be had and details to be finalised, so the information presented today is accurate as of today, the 15th of January for the record, and it is likely that some decisions will be consolidated come the spring. So look out for further newsletters, press releases, blogs, and another webinar. And I can actually confirm now that UK Natico themselves are going to be hosting a beginner's guide to understanding digital ATA carnets in February. So I will pop a link to that if you wanted to book on at the end of this webinar. Information such as this might be shared by your chamber if you're not with Bristol, but we'll do our best to answer any questions. So Just quickly, I'll just rewind a minute, as I said, in case there's anybody here who isn't familiar with ATA Carnets. So an ATA Carnet is often referred to as a passport for goods. It works in the same way as a passport, but for a set of goods. So a carnet is currently a physical paper document, which relates to a specific list of goods being checked and stamped as they pass through each customs border. The carnet can be used for multiple trips throughout the carnet's validity, taking those goods into and out of as many countries as necessary. The ATA Carnet scheme was ultimately created as a trade tool to facilitate simplified procedures for temporary exports and imports, allowing duty and tax-free movement of goods required for a commercial use for up to 1 year. So as some of you probably already know, making complicated customs declarations and paying hefty import duties every single time you take your equipment into and out of countries is not ideal. So the ATA Carnet scheme is there to ease this area of international trade, and it acts as a form of customs declaration to simplify the movement of goods on a temporary basis. Currently, there are over 80 countries and territories part of the scheme, and an ATA Carnet can be used for taking goods abroad for one of these 3 purposes: professional equipment, international trade fairs and exhibitions, and commercial samples. So let's introduce why I'm here to talk about digital carnets. As I said, currently a carnet is a physical document obtained from an issuing Chamber of Commerce, such as Business West. There is currently no digital equivalent, so you must take the physical document with the goods to facilitate the export and import. If this gets lost or damaged, this opens up risks of unanswerable claims from overseas customs should they require evidence of the goods re-exportation from their country and demand retrospective payment of duties, taxes, and even penalties in some cases. So the Digital Carnet is here to streamline this, among other benefits, which we'll discuss shortly. So here are what the current paper and card counterparts of an ATA Carnet look like. So the top row are counterfoils completed and stamped by customs authorities against the adjacent voucher, which is the bottom tier here. Customs would then retain that paper voucher as the evidence that the goods have come and gone from their country, whilst the counterfoil remains with the holder as evidence of the goods movement. So the reason I'm explaining this now is that you can see how admin errors occur all the time, such as the misplacement of these vouchers, handwriting errors, damage to the carnet document, all of which can end up having huge financial consequences for the carnet holder. So you can see here why this system really needs to enter the 21st century and become digitalized. So let's look at the timeline of the Digital Carnet project. So the paper carnet actually started in 1963 and is still in place today, which is quite surprising in today's digital age. So in 2017, the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC, approved the Digital Carnet project, and since then it has been in development, with the pilot phase being introduced in 2019. So it was then up to the International Chamber of Commerce and UK NATICO in our case to develop the infrastructure to make digital carnets a reality. Now, in case you didn't know, the UK NATICO is the UK's national guaranteeing organisation for ATA carnets. Each country has its own NGO, of whom govern and secure carnets in their respective countries. Now, we are proud that UK NATICO has been really instrumental in the global development of digital carnets, and it has put the UK at a significant advantage to get ahead of the digital developments before the go-live date of digital carnets begins around the world. So just to get a little bit more up to speed, as you can see here, we are currently in that preparation phase. So customs officials, issuing bodies, issuing systems, and carnet holders are being trained and informed on digital eATA carnets. So as you can imagine, this is a tremendous task. So in the meantime, digital eATA carnets can be trialled. So some selected ports around the world have been trained up and are accepting digital carnets only in a trial format, which are always stamped second to the paper carnet. We'll get onto the trials a little bit later. So this next phase is the most important one, the reason for this webinar, so please do listen in. So this has all been in place, ready for that crucial date, which is so close now. So the EU, Switzerland, Norway, and the UK are going live with digital carnets on the 1st of April 2026. So literally weeks away now. So this means that carnets issued destined for these four countries will be issued as a digital carnet after April the 1st. So if there's one thing to take away from my presentation today, it's that users of ATA Carnets need to understand and practice using digital carnets before this date. Shortly to follow these four countries will likely include the USA, Canada, China, and Australia, who may be going live before the end of 2026. And then the rest of the Carnet countries in the scheme will gradually become digitalised up until 2028 in a phased rollout, when all the countries are expected to use digital carnets from 2028 and paper carnets will be no more. So that's the last however many years in a nutshell. So the Digital EATA Carnet project has been in the works and led by UK Natico, as I said, the UK's guaranteeing organisation. So let's run through the project objectives. So the objectives are to digitalise the entire ATA Carnet, moving away from the physical document, which will ultimately streamline the entire process worldwide and reduce errors currently made in the old-fashioned pen and paper wet stamp method of processing carnets. So among others, the benefits are also the reduced environmental impact of all the paper that they are currently printed on. Crucially, a digital carnet cannot get lost because it is all based on the cloud. The journey of the goods can actually be tracked remotely by the issuing chamber, the carnet holder, freight forwarders, etc. And customs authorities also have a view of other customs transactions, which should ultimately reduce the amount of claims made against carnets in the future. And finally, as I said earlier, it will reduce the admin errors such as handwriting, missing stamps, lost paperwork, etc., which actually is one of the leading reasons for claims. So let's get into the bit that you're probably most interested in. So what is a digital EATA Carnet? So essentially, like many things these days, it's going to be hosted on an app. So the Carnet itself will be downloadable by a unique PIN and ID onto the app where all the data will appear. So how will you obtain a digital EATA Carnet? So you would apply for the Carnet online as usual through your chamber's issuing system. So in Business West case, we use eCert. So once the Carnet application has been checked and approved by the chamber, as usual, the data will get pulled via an API onto the central Digital Carnet software, which is called Mercury Core. And then rather than printing or waiting for anything to arrive in the post, you would instead download the Carnet onto your smartphone or tablet's Carnet app via a unique PIN and ID, which is provided by the issuing system, and that relates to the specific Carnet. This is then pulled from Mercury Core, where all the digital Carnet data is stored globally. And then the crucial point here is that the digital Carnet cannot get lost. It's all based on the cloud, so the Carnet can be downloaded onto multiple devices should your smartphone or tablet run out of battery or get lost during the goods movement. So this is a huge advantage over the current paper system. So then the holder or the forwarder would prepare the travel. That's what it will be known as, a travel, declaring the items to be taken to each destination. And that then creates a QR code to be presented to customs. And then this is the equivalent of completing the voucher and receiving a stamp if you are well versed on paper carnets. Customs then verify the data, they might inspect the goods, and then they'll process the transaction simply by scanning the QR code. This is then recorded on the app and the wider software, and the transaction is visible on the app and on Mercury Core, which can also be viewed by the issuing chamber and the customs authorities. And then once it is finished with and the goods have returned to the UK, the chamber will check the transactions and conduct the discharge process on the Carnet by checking for risks of potential claims as usual. So I have pre-recorded a demo here for a visual of how to use the app in case you've not seen it before. So just to reiterate, the application process for the Carnet remains the same. You will apply for the Carnet as usual on the issuing system, and then once the chamber have approved the Carnet, that is when you would access the app to download the Carnet and begin to prepare your travels. You won't need to wait for anything physical to arrive in the post. We do have several more how-to guides on our website, so feel free to have a look there. So I'm going to hit play on this. Apologies in advance for any times I stumble over my words during this clip, but hopefully it will be informative. So once I have had the Carnet approved on the issuing system, so in Business West case eCert, I'm then going to need the Carnet ID and PIN, which I can obtain from the chamber, to then download the Carnet onto the app. So the first thing I'll show you here is what the icon for the ATA Carnet app looks like. I have downloaded this from the Google Play Store, however it should be available on most app stores. I can start by pressing login here because I have already registered for an account. However, if you're first using the app, you will need to register. I would recommend that if you're working in a team that you create one central login so you can all see the Carnets in the same place. However, Carnets can be downloaded onto multiple devices, onto multiple apps. This is the home screen, so we've got Carnets, notifications, help and settings. I'm going to click Carnets. And this is where we have the list of all the Carnets that I have previously downloaded onto the app. So I'm going to download a new one onto the app today for the demo. So I have pre-prepared a Carnet on eCert and had it approved. So in order to download it onto the app, I'm going to click the plus icon at the top. This is where we can type in the Carnet number or the ID. We can also type in the Carnet PIN code, which is unique to the Carnet. There is also the option there to click that QR code, which will bring up the camera, so you can then scan the QR code of the Carnet that would be provided by your issuing chamber. So I'm going to start by typing in the Carnet ID, which I have in a screen in front of me at the moment. And there we have it. So in this case, we wanted this one here, GBBRI 260. So I'm going to click on that, and this is the face of the Carnet. So it resembles very much the green front cover of your paper Carnets. So it's got that Carnet ID at the top with the Carnet number, the issue date and the validity, which is of course 12 months. It shows its status, which is issued. We then have the holder name and address. This is just a completely fictional example. It has the representatives authorised to travel with the Carnet, the intended use of goods, the total value of goods, the item numbers, and the total weight. It also shows the set of vouchers. This will keep a live tally, so once they've been used, they will whittle down and show the total and available. In this case, there was just one of each issued, so it shows just that one total for each. Here it says the Carnet may be used in the following countries or customs territories, so this will reflect whichever countries have been selected upon the application on eCert. In this case, it was just Australia. At the bottom here, it then also shows the issuing chamber. At the bottom here, there are several different tabs. So we've got items, so as it suggests, this is almost like the back cover of the front. The green cover, sorry, and this will show all of the items and their descriptions. We then have a documents tabs, so this will be for things like letters of authorization or any other relevant documents that you would usually physically attach to a Carnet. We've then got the travels, which we will go through shortly, but essentially this is where you would create the QR codes for the customs officials to scan, so essentially the equivalent of completing a Carnet voucher in a paper version. History here, this is where you would see all of those transactions which are live as customs go and scan the QR codes. Everything would appear here in this history tab. So let's go and create a travel. So to do that, we can either go to the details tab, scroll down and press prepare travel,
or we can go to the Travels tab and again press Prepare Travel or this plus icon in the top right there. If the carnet had been returned or discharged, cancelled, etc., that icon would not appear, so it wouldn't be possible to create further travels. So I'm going to hit Prepare Travel. So this is where we are going to fill in what in the paper version would be a voucher. So here, departure destination, this is where we can free type. So let's pretend we are going from the UK to Australia, Sydney. Here, departure destination, our departure is of course from the United Kingdom to Australia. These are the only destinations that will appear because that is where the carnet was bonded for upon application on ESET. To location city event, again this is a free type box if you had a particular exhibition name, something like that you might want to pop in there. Means of transport, this is a mandatory field. Details, remarks, flight numbers, etc. optional free text. There's the option here to pop in those transits, so that is the equivalent of the blue counterfoils in paper carnets. And here is where we would declare the items we want to take. So we can either use this plus icon here to add as many items as necessary. We can also free type, or we can hit the select all button if we are going to take all of the items. Again, a free text box there for any optional packaging details, and then we're going to hit save. Oops. There we go, I've solved my Wi-Fi issues. So now we're going to hit save. As you can see there, that has created that travel. It can be edited up until it is scanned by customs authorities. So that one there is specifically for the exit from the UK and entry into Australia. If we click on it, it brings up those QR codes. So we've got the green validation, so essentially that is scanned by the UK customs authorities to activate the carnet. The export from the UK and the import into the Australia. As you can see, the colours align with currently what the colours of the physical carnet are to prevent any confusion. You have to click on this I confirm to the disclaimer before it will reveal that QR code. If you needed to share it with the person who was travelling the goods, then up here in the top you can click that share button. It does provide this disclaimer that you can read in your own time. Hit confirm, and then it gives multiple options as to how you want to share that voucher. The options it's presented me here is Outlook and Teams. However, if you had WhatsApp, Facebook, anything like that, you can share them in that method. Now this will be only for the export and import, so we would need to create a new travel for the return journey. So we click add. We'd want to go Australia to the UK, complete everything like we already did. It does also give you the added options here for the items not being re-exported or items processed or repaired abroad if you needed to make those sort of declarations in the cases of split consignments, etc. Hit save, and there we have the re-export and re-import counterfoils as well. Once all of those have been scanned by customs authorities, your goods have gone and come back to the UK, you would then return the carnet to the chamber, and we would hit the return button on our end, and the carnet can no longer be used.
Okay, I'm coming back in live now. So let me just elaborate now on one of the points I made during that demo in regard to sharing the declarations. So I appreciate that often you, as the applicant of the ATA Carnet, you might not be the individual responsible for taking the goods over the borders. So in other words, making those declarations might not be your responsibility. You might be an agent, freight forwarder, or simply delegating the travel aspect to a friend or a colleague. So there is plenty of freedom depending on what your responsibility is during the carnet's lifetime. So in the same way that you might apply for a carnet and send the original to the holder for use, you can do the same for the digital carnet. So once you have received the carnet ID and PIN from the chamber, you are then free to send the details to any recipient so they have the ability to then create those travels and make the declarations to customs. Similarly, you might be the holder of the carnet, but you have a freight forwarder who would be handling the shipment. Again, you can share the ID and PIN with them so they can download the app and the carnet onto their own phone, ready to make those declarations on your behalf. However, you might be in the opposite scenario. It might be that you, as the applicant or recipient of the ID and PIN, wish to maintain full control over making the declarations. It might be that you don't wish to trust a driver with the full capability to make the declarations, and this is fine. So you would just create the declaration remotely via the app and simply share a copy of the QR code with a recipient for them to present to customs via WhatsApp, Facebook, etc. You can even print it out if you want to. And in this scenario, they wouldn't be able to make any edits to the declaration. You would then retain the control. So again, there is plenty of freedom for you and your teams to discuss what works best per carnet. Now, I must just stress this point in yellow here, that the carnet holder always remains responsible for payment of duty, regardless of who is shipping the goods, making the travels, or declaring the goods and the digital carnet to customs. So if you are the carnet holder, think carefully about who you wish to share the details with. So why is this all so important to know now? So as I mentioned earlier, on the 1st of April 2026, these 4 countries or customs unions are going live for digital eATA carnets. So the UK, Switzerland, EU and Norway have all confirmed that they're going live on the 1st of April. It's funny that they chose April Fool's Day because I'm sure it will very much feel like that on the day. So what this means is that any carnets issued that are destined for these 4 countries after this date will be issued as a digital carnet. You won't be provided with a paper one. You must learn in advance how to use the app and manage a digital carnet so you are prepared for the future trips. As I mentioned earlier, other countries will gradually digitalise, some sooner rather than later, so this is why we need to get testing, as this will all come round much quicker than we can imagine. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably wondering what happens if I'm travelling to a country which has gone live with a digital carnet and a country which is still on the paper system with the same goods. So don't worry, there is a plan for this. This will be referred to as the parallel procedure, which will likely last for the next few years until all countries within the ATA Carnet scheme have digitalised their systems. So simply put, if you are travelling to a paper-only destination, you will be issued with a normal paper carnet, and this will be accepted by that country as long as it was issued prior to that country going live for digital. So, for example, let's say you receive a paper carnet for a trip to the EU on the 31st of March. The EU then go live for digital carnets the next day on the 1st of April. The paper carnet should be accepted within the EU for its entire validity, since it was issued prior to the EU going live. Any other destinations which have not yet digitalised will continue to accept paper carnets as usual. Of course, if you are travelling to a digital-only destination, such as Switzerland, after April the 1st, you'll be issued with a digital carnet only. So in other words, you'll be sent the carnet ID and PIN, and then it'll be your responsibility to access the app, set up your travels. And then finally, if your itinerary contains a digital-only destination and a paper-only destination in the same trip, you'll be provided with both a digital carnet and a paper carnet. They will be clones of one another and they'll contain the same carnet number. So the paper carnet should show all of the destinations on the front cover, likely separated in different columns, but that is still to be confirmed. And then the digital carnet will show only the digital destinations within the app, and this is just to prevent the user creating a QR code for a destination which does not yet accept digital carnets. So for these parallel carnets, it is also essential that you get both carnets stamped and scanned by UK customs upon activation, export, and re-import. You'd then get the digital carnet scanned at the digital destination and the paper carnet stamped at the paper destination. And then you must get both carnets scanned and stamped upon the re-import just to show that full round trip on both carnets. Now, I'll try and make that simpler with an example. So let's say on April the 1st, 2026, you need to take your kit to the EU and the USA over the span of a couple of months for a gig. So in that case, you would apply on your issuing system as normal, and then you would receive a paper ATA carnet showing the USA and the EU on the front cover. And then you would download the same carnet via the PIN and ID onto the app, which would show the EU as the sole destination because the USA aren't live yet. So once you get to UK customs, you'll get your paper carnet stamped and the digital carnet scanned to open both carnets in parallel. You'll then enter the EU and get only the digital carnet scanned, and upon re-export as well, you'll leave the EU with only the digital carnet. Once you get to the USA, you'll get the paper carnet stamped by US Customs, and then again on re-export. And then it is super important that upon re-import to the UK, you get both the paper and the digital carnet stamped to show the complete round trip on both carnets. So this will help answer any claims to prove that the goods returned to the UK, just because it's not guaranteed that the USA, for example in this case, would accept a digital transaction as evidence of the goods being re-imported because they're not live yet. So that's why it's important that the UK, you get both carnets stamped. So this parallel procedure will be in place for the next few years whilst countries gradually digitalise. And of course, hopefully come 2028, all of the countries should be digital and the paper carnet will be no more. So all of the transactions will occur on the app. So just to make you aware of some important changes that will come with the digitalisation of carnets. So once a digital carnet has been issued, there can be no changes made to the carnet as the data will become locked into the Mercury core system. So this would include the holder name and address, any changes to the list of authorised representatives. However, just a side note on this, the letter of authorisation can remain intact for authorisation of people who are not named in box B. The intended use of goods can't be changed, and crucially, the general list detail, so item description, serial numbers, weights, values, etc. So if any of the above needed changing after the carnet has been issued, it cannot be overwritten and reprinted like you might be able to with a paper carnet. A change would require a brand new carnet application with a brand new carnet number. Any intricacies there, I would check with your local chamber that you get your carnets from because they might vary depending on their systems. Crucially here, this also includes countries and destinations. So you wouldn't be able to add a country to a carnet after it has been approved, even with an itinerary change whilst the goods are overseas. So in other words, a carnet cannot be rebonded for a new destination post-issue. And this is due to guarantee parameters within Mercury Core, and it is out of our hands. So because this is a huge change, we would recommend that holders amend their workflows to become as fully prepared as possible for any destinations which might be visited from the outset and ensure that these are applied for in the first instance. So it might be that you add as many countries as possible onto the original application on a just-in-case basis, more so than you would do now. However, we do appreciate that it's not quite as simple as that, and it poses a huge change to the current procedure. It might, I know that you will work in touring and music, and you could book last-minute gigs when you're already overseas. So there is options here, which I'll outline now. So in the case that your goods are overseas on a digital carnet and last minute, you need to take them to a new destination, which is not on the carnet already, you would need to apply for a brand new carnet in order to take those goods to the new country. We would be able to issue a new carnet for the same list of goods, and this would incur a new security covering all of the previous destinations and the new ones too. The exact procedures in regards to the transfer of liability between the original and the new carnet are still to be confirmed. However, it is likely that it will compare quite closely to how a replacement carnet is processed. So, for an example, if your goods are overseas in Switzerland on a digital carnet, but you have just booked a new gig in Norway, you can apply for a brand new carnet for these goods with both Switzerland and Norway on the list, and you'd then get the new carnet validated by the National Carnet Unit, since of course there is no export to occur, so the box H wouldn't be stamped by A on the export. And then you'd get the goods stamped out of Switzerland on the original carnet, and then stamp them into Norway on the new carnet and carry on from there. And then that new carnet will have taken over the liability for the goods and should be used for the rest of the trip. Again, it would be essential to receive the UK scan on both carnets upon return of the goods to the UK to close them both off in case of claims. We as a chamber are going to be learning more about this system in the coming weeks because processes are still to be finalised. I know that there are some meetings scheduled for the end of the month between global stakeholders to really finalise this detail. So we'll circulate that as quickly as we can. We do envisage that the issue date of the new carnet would be the same as the issue date of the original, or at least the validity date would be the same as the original, just to ensure that the goods are not staying overseas for more than 12 months. So now I've given you all of that information, you might be wondering, okay, what can I do now then? So the answer is to trial a digital carnet. Now, April 26, 2026 will come around in no time, so it is essential that users of ATA Carnets become familiar with the new processes, whether that be as an applicant, agent, forwarder, or holder. Until the go live date in 2026, digital carnets are purely a trial. They're not legally binding. The paper carnet is still your official declaration. So therefore, if you are trialing a digital carnet, you must first present your paper carnet to customs and then the digital carnet second. Customs authorities would not accept a digital carnet transaction as evidence in the case of a claim whilst we're in this trial phase. So the paper carnet is the most important one until the go live. So in order to take part in the trial and provide the crucial input to the rollout of the project, you would just need to simply apply for your carnet as usual on your issuing system. You can request the PIN and ID from your chamber and download the app. Once you have followed our user guides, should you need them, you should have the digital carnet prepared on your smartphone, ready to create the travels in tandem with the usual paper vouchers. First and most importantly, activate and get your paper carnet stamped, and then ask the customs officer to scan your digital carnet as a test. And then with practice, you'll become completely ahead of the curve and prepared for go live, which might stand you at an advantage above competitors, for example. So here is a non-exhaustive list of the ports currently involved in the preparation phase who are accepting digital carnets as part of the trial. So we have been told that hopefully all UK ports will be accepting digital carnets from the end of the month. However, it's not been fully confirmed. Obviously, training that many customs officials on how to process a digital carnet is a big task, and they also all need to be provided with the correct equipment. But hopefully, come beginning of February, all UK ports should be testing. However, the ones on the screen here are the London, Heathrow, Edinburgh, Holyhead and Dover Sevington should be testing. So if you are travelling to or from any of these ports with your usual paper ATA Carnet, request access to the digital e-ATA Carnet 2 from your issuing chamber so you can do some testing. And crucially as well, the Dunkirk route seems to have joined the trial, and Calais as well shortly. So this will open up much more opportunity for testing. So I hope you're all still with me. I know that's all a lot of information. We are nearly there. I just thought I'd go through some FAQs just to fill in any gaps before we open up for questions from you. So, how do I present a digital carnet to customs offices which are not available to the public or those that require a pre-notification? So in this case, the travel is prepared in advance and assigned to a port via the pre-declaration service. So we know that sometimes customs officials are not available to the public. They might be tucked away in a back office where you may currently need to leave your paper carnet with them to collect at a later time when it is stamped. Or sometimes customs offices require pre-notification of your arrival so they can assign an officer to the location. And other times, inventory-linked ports might not have a permanent border force present. So don't worry, you won't need to leave your phone with the customs office or try and chase them down to scan your digital carnet. A setup called pre-declaration has been put in place. So essentially, the holder can prepare the travel in advance and hit a button saying add pre-declaration. This will then send the declaration through to an assigned chosen port for customs to remotely view and process the transaction on their systems. Excuse me. The holder would then need to authorize the declaration once the goods arrive at the port for the customs official to approve without the need to scan the QR code. They can just do it remotely on their system. There are many other benefits to this pre-declaration service, such as if the original declaration is incorrect, but the driver doesn't have the editing permissions on the app, a member of the back office at home can remotely push the amended declaration through to the location to replace it. So what if I am travelling to overseas territories? So overseas territories will need to be added to the itinerary separately. So for example, if you're travelling to the Canary Islands, this must be entered into the travel and they won't accept Spain. This is different to current paper practice, and I believe that UK and Attica are still coding in a lot of the territories into Mercury Core as we speak, but they should be ready come go live. This is a big one. So, will countries provide a grace period for the acceptance of paper carnets after they go live? So, simply put, any carnet issued as paper prior to the country's go live date will be accepted as paper for its validity. During the parallel procedure, both paper and digital carnets will be listed on the front cover. So if a country goes live after that carnet has been issued, the country should accept the paper carnet since it was issued prior to the going live date for digital. However, we're not aware of any circumstances where a digital carnet is issued after the go live date and paper carnet was issued after the go live date and they would accept that. We think that the any country will only accept a digital carnet if it's issued after the go live date. What will happen if I need a replacement carnet, so an extension? So in this case, you would apply for a replacement carnet as usual, subject to any country-specific requirements. And then whether or not that replacement carnet will be in the same format, so paper or digital, as the original, this is also still to be confirmed. Of course, if you require a replacement carnet for a carnet previously issued as paper, so any carnet issued within a year prior to a country's go live date, it's not been concluded whether the replacement carnet will be paper or digital yet. The different countries seem to have different opinions on this, so it's an area still to be hashed out at the various meetings that the people in charge are still to be finalising. If a replacement is needed for a carnet which the original was digital, then the replacement will also be issued digitally. Of course, this won't be a problem until April 2027 when the first digital carnets start to maybe need replacing. As you may know, currently, paper carnets are sent to the National Carnet Unit for validation if they're a replacement, and the digital equivalent of this will be to make that declaration via the app and hit that add pre-declaration button that I was just talking about, and then you would assign the National Carnet Unit as the port for validation. This would then ping that green validation code to the National Carnet Unit for them to remotely activate. And again, as far as the transfer of liability occurs from the replacement, we imagine that to be pretty much the same as it is now with paper carnets. So how much will digital carnets cost? Now, I can't fully comment on this because it will depend chamber to chamber. But for Business West, we are not charging any costs associated with testing, and we will be reviewing our pricing structures after go live. However, if you are interested, you will need to contact your local chamber. And finally, how will I return a digital carnet? So, of course, at present, since the carnet is a physical document, the physical return of the document renders it unusable by the holder going forward. So the chamber can then physically check the stamps over and analyze it for any potential claims, conducting the discharge process. Now, within the digital Carnet system, it will remain the holder's responsibility to tell the chamber that the digital Carnet is no longer required, to essentially return the Carnet. And then the chamber will be able to enact a return on the Mercury system, which will then make the Carnet unusable. So they can no longer add any travels or anything like that. And the status on the app will state returned. Now, this cannot be redacted, so make sure you are certainly finished with the carnet before telling the chamber that it needs to be returned. Further info on how to return the carnet should be acquired from your chamber. At Business West, we would just be expecting an email currently. And then after that, as usual, we would check the carnet over for potential claims by checking the transactions on the Mercury course system. As far as post-issue scenarios go, such as claims management and just generally discharging, we'll be going ahead with our usual processes, but we will be receiving further training from UK Natico on any changes to discharging next year. So I think that rounds off the Digital Carnet experience. So I'll leave that there. I appreciate that was a lot of information, so thank you for your attention and patience. Of course, happy to welcome some questions now. And just a reminder about that UK Natico webinar that's coming up in February. I'll pop a link in the chat now.
So Megan, we've got quite a few questions in the chat function.
Okay,
if you want to have a
lovely.
look at
Let's
that.
go through them. Oops, sorry, I've just moved on my slides. Sorry, just a moment. Let me move that back so my email address is on the screen. There we go. Okay, so questions. So we've got from Dave. So are the cost of the parallel carnet the same as the digital or paper? If you need a parallel carnet, are you having to input all the info twice? So as far as costs are concerned, this is something that within Business West we're reviewing after the go live, as it's a bit of a grey area currently because we haven't experienced it yet. But if you're with a different chamber, I would take this up with them as they might have already clarified their pricing structures. And in terms of needing a parallel carnet, are you having to input the info twice? No, that's not the case. So in the e-cert issuing system, it should be inputted. So the system will know whether a country is digital or paper. So you will apply as usual. And then if it's a digital only country, you'll just get given the PIN and ID. If it's a paper only country, you'll get given a paper carnet. So no, you won't have to input the info twice, nor make the application twice. From Mary, please could you confirm if the timeline to get a carnet issued will be the same as the paper carnet? The fact we can't make any changes is a bit concerning, so it would be good to understand the timeline. So in terms of the application process and the checking process on the chamber side, I'd imagine that to be the same as it is now because all the checking processes will be the same. But of course, it speeds it up massively in terms of not having to physically print that document and in a lot of cases have that overnight postage of getting that document to you. So as soon as we hit approve, you're ready to go with your carnet, even if you were, flying in an hour's time, you can quickly create your travels on the app as soon as we hit approve. So it does save that element. In terms of the fact we can't make any changes, I appreciate that is concerning, especially with the countries. But yes, it does save a bit of time not having to print the carnet and post it out. So perhaps hopefully that will give you a little bit extra time to maybe plan itineraries and things like that. Okay, and the question from Dave. So if applying for a new one, you said you need a new security. So therefore that would be double. Therefore the cost would be double to add potentially just one other country. Unfortunately, yes, this is one of the biggest disadvantages of this system, unfortunately. Again, if you're with a chamber other than Business West, I would just query this with them, as I can't fully comment on how other chambers issue their security. However, when it comes to or Business West, then yes, you would need to apply for the new carnet with all of the same countries on it and more. So yes, it could be double the premium or the cash deposit or however you choose to secure your carnet, which is ideally why trying to get as many countries as possible from the outset on the carnet is the best way of doing it. So we've got, does the do not import list still apply to the digital carnet? I'm not quite sure what you mean by do not import list. Is it perhaps countries that the UK advises we don't import into? If so, yes, I imagine that all of the carnet requirements still say the same with the countries. But please let me know if I've misunderstood that question. Okay, so next question.
Megan, he just said, I mean the list of items on the carnet. Does that help, or do you want me to unmute Jacob?
Yeah, do you unmute Jacob and then we can see what we mean by that one. Thank you.
Do you want to do another one a sec? Oh, hang on, I can quickly do it. And now Mike. So Jacob, do you want to quickly ask your question?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
No, so basically when the driver is about to cross the border, so the carnet is issued and you've got a full list of items, let's say 1 to 200. When filling in the carnet just before crossing the customs, they can fill in the do not import list, which omits certain things from the list. And
Okay.
once they obviously cross the border, it needs to come back exactly the same.
Yes.
But this is the wiggle room with changes to the carnet that sometimes we might have. And this is what I wanted to ask, if the same thing applies to the digital carnet.
Yes, so when making the declaration, you can select the amount of items you wish to take out, as you can now with the paper one, by either free typing the numbers you wish to take out or adding a certain amount and making that declaration. If then the customs official disagreed and they wanted to amend that because they didn't want certain ones to be imported, the declaration can be amended. So it can be edited up until the point that the customs official scans it. So yes, if the customs official didn't want you to import certain items, it can be amended and declare the correct ones. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, perfect. Okay, so given this is moving to a digital state, surely any amendments to either the kit in case of damage whilst on tour and a replacement is needed, or additional countries should be easier. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. Any amendments to this? So I'm just trying to get my head around that. Any amendments to either kit in case of damage whilst on tour? So yeah, I think you mean amendments to general lists, etc., like that. It's one of those. So what I was meaning in my point during the presentation is currently we could issue a paper carnet, and before it's used, a customer could say, "Oh, we need to amend the serial number," and currently that's okay. We can just re-upload the list and reprint it, but that's just not the case with the digital carnets. It goes through to the Mercury system, can't be edited, so that would need to be reapplied for with a brand new carnet. You can discuss it with, so if you ended up at a border, with a different item that had a different serial number, for example, you can talk to customs officials about that and they'd have the authority to alter that or approve or deny that change. But yeah, it is out of our hands, those parameters in which we can't amend something after it's been issued. And next question there, how much training is being given to customs officers? on this at border ports, especially around the needs of musicians and artists. So UK Natico in the UK have been in charge of doing all that training. I know that they've been doing in-person day-long courses with different ports on this. I know that I think one of the most recent ones was actually in the Channel Islands. They went out there, so they should all be being trained in every eventuality. However, this is the reason why we need to be trialing, because they can be trained, but if they're not actively doing it before the go live date, it's likely that some eventualities won't be accounted for. So that's why we're really encouraging this trial period whilst the digital carnets aren't legal tender. If you mess up a digital carnet now, it's fine because the paper carnet is the legal one. So yeah, this is why we need to be trialing to get the customs officers trained, because there are hundreds of them, and yeah, it's hard for the UK Natico to train for every eventuality. Next question, how long does the acceptance of a paper after go live last? Will it be for the full year of the paper being issued? So yes, as far as we're aware, the paper carnet should be accepted for its entire validity as long as it was issued prior to the go live date. So a carnet issued on the 31st of March for the EU should be accepted as paper until the 31st of March 2027. What happens during the trial period if it exports from a digital trial port but is going to a non-digital trial port? Can we trial the digital carnet, or do we need to stick to paper? So during this trial phase, you don't need to get the digital carnet stamped to every single port you visit, because it's just the trial. So yeah, you could exit from London Heathrow, who are involved in the trial, get the digital carnet scanned there, enter the USA, who aren't currently trialing, and ignore the digital carnet, just go forward with the paper one. And then when you come back to the UK, get the digital carnet scanned by the UK Heathrow customs, because it's just a trial. So as many as possible is the advice for the trial. Of course, when digital are live, you will need to get them scanned at every single port like you do now. I've done the chat there, so I'm just going to hop to the Q&A. We're running out of time slightly, so I'll try and speed through. Okay, we haven't got anything in the Q&A. So hopefully I've covered things there. I'll just do as I said and pop the link to the UK Natico website, webinar in the chat there for you. So it's free. You would just need to make a free account and book on that one. Did anybody have any more questions before we close up today? We've got a minute to spare. Any last final ones? No? Well, I hope that was informative for everybody. As I said earlier, we'll be sending around the recording of this in case you need to review any points. Get in touch if you have any specific questions. And yeah, that's all I have to say. So hope everyone has a good day.